Remember the first few times you tried to cook? Or maybe you've been too afraid to start. Trust me, I've been there. As someone that cooks almost every day, professionally and at home, I'm here to tell you that it gets easier and tastier. I've spent 10 years in the kitchen learning these lessons, and today I'm going to share them all with you. These tips have not only made cooking an activity that I enjoy, but I actually look forward to it. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Originally from Calcutta, India, I'm now a private chef in Las Vegas. Lesson number 1, don't follow the recipe to a T. I used to do this when I just started cooking and it made me miserable. I was mesmerized by how at ease my grandmother was in the kitchen, and I chalked it up to her years of experience or the multitude of meals that she's made for us before. However, it took me a long time to learn that there was a method to her process, and I've adopted that now. I study the recipe before I start cooking. This is key because I don't want to constantly switch back and forth between cooking and the recipe, because it distracts me from the process and it makes it feel a lot more frantic. For example, if a recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of ginger and 1 tablespoon of garlic, I think about the proportions, or I make a mental note of, oh, I need more ginger than garlic. It doesn't matter if you use 1.5 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon. The end result is not going to be that different unless you're baking, of course. For the method, I try to group different steps with common themes into stages. I'll give you an example from a recent recipe that I made on this channel, saag paneer. So this recipe has about 12 to 15 steps. However, when I look at that recipe and if I look at the 12 steps, it can be a bit daunting. So what I try to do is group the steps into themes. So the first stage was to par cook the ingredients. So I knew I had to blanch my spinach and puree it, and I had to saute my paneer. The second stage was to bring the paneer and the sauce together. And so I knew that I had to cook the paneer with the spinach and the other spices. And the last stage was to take the flavor to the next level and present the dish, meaning make the tempering and garnishing the dish. That helps me not look at the recipe every 5 minutes, and it helps me enjoy the process of cooking a lot more. Lesson number 2, prep all the ingredients in advance. I've heard this countless times from chefs I admire, from mentors, etc., but it took me a long time to learn that this actually creates efficiency. I used to think of it as a waste of time. I thought I'd chop the onions while the oil was heating up and mince the garlic while the onions were cooking, make the spice powder while the base of the sauce was simmering. And all it did was make the cooking process rushed and frantic. I wasn't enjoying myself. I was constantly thinking about what I need to do next. So now what I do is I spend the first 10 to 15 minutes prepping all of my ingredients and laying them out in front of me. That enables me to focus on the cooking process and give each ingredient the time and attention it deserves. Essentially, it comes down to a concept that we're all familiar with, which is doing tasks that are similar in nature at the same time. This creates efficiency and allows our brain to focus on and get more proficient at the task at hand. Some of the best dishes I've cooked are the ones where I'm completely present with the current moment, and prepping my ingredients ahead of time facilitates that. Lesson number 3, clean as you go. Similar to the last one, I thought this was a massive waste of time. I had to learn it the hard way while doing my pop-up dinners in San Francisco. I used to think, why would I waste my time cleaning the countertop while 25 guests were waiting for their dinner and I had 3 more courses to prep and plate. I learned this from the first sous chef I ever hired, who was more qualified and experienced than I was. Here's a bonus lesson. Hire people that you look up to. I was so intimidated to hire her, but Being with her in the kitchen made me such a better cook. A clean kitchen means a clear mind, and it allows you to do the best you can on that dish. Lesson number 4, rely on your instincts. Now, this one might be a no-brainer for some of you, but it took me an awfully long time to learn this. I thought that I had to follow the recipe to a T and that the author knew best what was happening in my pan. But that's not true. The way you can develop these instincts is through practice and repetition and allowing yourself to make mistakes so you can learn from them. If a recipe recommends something and your instincts tell you something's not right, listen to it. Turn off the stove, troubleshoot, and resume. The author doesn't know what's happening in your pan. You know best. For example, this happens to me a lot when I'm making a dough of some kind. Different brands of flour absorb moisture differently, so I always have to use my instincts and feel the dough and understand the consistency before adding the amount of water prescribed. I may have to increase or decrease the amount of moisture in the dough depending on how the flour reacts with the water in the moment in my bowl. Lesson number 5. You're the expert on your palate. Most recipes are recommendations. Unless you're baking something, you don't need to be 100% precise. To me, that's the joy in cooking. Let me give you an example. I cook chicken teriyaki almost once a week. It's simple, it's easy, and it's delicious. It's perfect weeknight dinner. Originally, teriyaki sauce does not call for garlic, but I always add garlic to my teriyaki sauce because I love the flavor of it. Sure, it's not the authentic teriyaki sauce, but it's delicious and it's modified to suit my palate. Of course, there are some general principles in cooking that I want to follow. After all, I want to create something that's edible. However, once you understand these principles, it gets a lot easier. If you're loving these lessons, please subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends and family. It means a lot to me. Lesson number 6, season in stages. I cannot stress the importance of this enough. Seasoning in stages allows you to create a more well-rounded flavor. I know chefs use this term a lot, but to me what it means is that each ingredient, it gets to express itself fully. So for instance, if I'm making a sauce with tomatoes as the base, if I add salt to the tomatoes the moment I add them to the pan, I'm going to taste more tomato flavor in the finished product. The second thing is that it reduces the risk of me over seasoning my dish by adding all of the salt in one go. And thirdly, it makes the cooking process a lot more efficient because adding salt reduces the cooking time of ingredients by drawing out the moisture from them a lot quicker. Lesson number 7, taste constantly. Tasting constantly allows me to evaluate where I'm at and adjust the flavors and the steps accordingly. In professional kitchens, there is usually a container full of tasting spoons. The purpose of that is to encourage the cook to taste their dish multiple times throughout the cooking process. Your palate is the most powerful tool you have in the kitchen, and you want to use it generously. Lesson number 8, let the seasons inspire you. When I'm feeling uninspired in the kitchen, I let nature guide me. Whether that's cooking with seasonal produce or cooking for the weather, I enjoy every bit of it. In the summer months, I look forward to making a fresh salad with seasonal tomatoes and mozzarella. Because the tomatoes are in season, they taste so much sweeter and more delicious that all you need is a drizzle of olive oil and some salt. When I lived in California, summers meant a bounty of citrus, which meant that I could bake these delicious treats in my kitchen, and the lovely smell of citrus would waft through my whole house. During my time in LA, I used to get this weekly farm box. It consisted of local seasonal produce, and it was the highlight of my week. Sometimes I didn't even know the names of the fruits and vegetables in the box, but that's what inspired me to tap tap into my curiosity and discover something that I'd never cooked with before. In the winter months, I love making rich, hearty braised dishes like stews or lentil soups. There's something about a dish that's been simmering away for hours on the stove that makes me feel more comfortable in those cold winter nights. Lesson number 9. Templatize your meals. This lesson was a game changer for me. Templatizing your meals means that you don't have to come up with them from scratch. So typically what I do on a weeknight to prepare dinner under an hour is I look into my freezer and I see what are the proteins I have. I'm no nutrition expert, but I know what are the major components that go into creating a balanced meal. For me, that's a protein, some carbohydrates, and some vegetables. So every night I pick the protein and that's the central component of my meal. I build my meal around that. So I know I need a carbohydrate and I'll pick rice or noodles or bread. And then whatever vegetable or produce that I have in my fridge, that's what I'll use to create the vegetable component. So let me give you an example from a couple of nights ago. We wanted to eat shrimp. And so there are two ways that I go with shrimp. Either I'll make a mildly spiced coconut curry or I'll make a stir fry. My husband was craving stir fry that night, so we went that route. And we'd had rice the night before, so we went with noodles. I had some broccoli and cabbage lying around in my fridge, and so I added those to the noodles. It was quick and simple and delicious and came together in under an hour. The cleanup was pretty easy too, because I used the same wok to cook the shrimp and stir fry the noodles. Once you have a template, you can try a few recipes and you'll quickly discover your go-tos that can be on rotation every week. Lesson number 10. This is probably the most important lesson. Practice mindfulness and be present. If you know me, you know I despise washing dishes. So much so that I started dreading cooking because I was constantly thinking about how many dishes I'd have to wash after cooking. It was especially tough after a busy dinner service when it was 11 p.m. at night and I had a pile of dishes in the sink. I was frustrated and tired of feeling this way. It made me dread the very thing I enjoyed. So I decided to change the way I approached it. At that time, I was really getting into Ashtanga yoga and I decided to take the lessons from the mat to the kitchen, and it changed my world. Instead of thinking about the multitude of dishes I'd have to wash, I focused on the spices that were sizzling in the hot oil or how the red onion turned from a deep purple to a pale pink as it cooks. It helped me be more present and give my full attention to the cooking process so I could further develop my instincts that I talked about in a previous tip. It also made sure that I made the best possible dish because I wasn't wandering elsewhere. I was completely focused on the task at hand. And here's the bonus tip. Go easy on yourself. I definitely didn't do that when I started cooking. And it actually made me dread cooking and enjoy it less. Allow yourself to make those mistakes. What's the worst thing that can happen? You order takeout? Not a big deal. Allowing yourself to make those mistakes and learn from them will only make you a better cook. Which tip did you find the most helpful? Let me know in the comments. Much like life, cooking is about enjoying the process. I hope this video inspires you to cook something for someone you love. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love my tips to enjoy your dinner party as the host. I'll link it for you here.